everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm excited to share with you a comprehensive tutorial on bodice pattern making using the Müller method. If you've ever wondered how to accurately use size charts, apply the core formulas, and draft a perfect basic pattern, then you're in the right place. I'll be walking you through each step, from the fundamentals to the most common adjustments, all in a simple and easy to understand way. Plus, I'm sharing some personal insights and tips that I've gained from my own experience with this method. Whether you're new to the Müller method or looking to refine your skills, this video is packed with everything you need. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. It's a must-watch for anyone serious about pattern making. Let's get started. Using the size chart. To start with this method, it's recommended to first use the size chart to draft your pattern and then personalize it with individual measurements. However, you will also use some personal measurements while drafting the pattern. So the main question is, how do you know which size to use? The answer is that for drafting a bodice pattern, your bust measurement determines your size, and for a lower body pattern, your hip measurement does. If you've checked out the size chart I've shared with you, the link is in the description box. You'll see two size charts for heights 164 cm and 168 cm. If your height is 164 cm or shorter, you go with the size chart for 164 cm. If you're taller, use the chart for 168 cm. Now compare your bust measurement with numbers in the chart. If your bust measurement matches one of the sizes, the numbers in that column will guide you in drafting the pattern. But if there is no exact match, you can average the two sizes between which your bust measurement falls to create a mid-size column. Let me give you an example. Let's say your bust measurement is 94 cm. There is no exact size for 94 cm in the chart, but you can find the mid-size numbers by averaging size 40 with a 92 cm bust and size 42 with a 96 cm bust. So, which size measurements should you use? The key measurements for drafting a bodice pattern are bust, waist, hip, and back neck width. Some measurements are determined by formulas, while others are based on individual measurements that are used during pattern drafting. Formulas. As I mentioned in the previous section, you'll need 4 measurements to start. 3 of these come from the size chart and 1 is obtained through measuring. Choose the bust, waist, and hip measurements from the chart based on your size, and take the height measurement of yourself or the person for whom you're sewing. In the Müller method, there are both vertical and horizontal measurements, and in this section, we'll go over the formulas for each. Vertical measurements. Arm side depth. Calculated as 1/10 of bust circumference plus 10.5 cm. Back bodice length to the waist equals 1/4 of the total height minus 1 cm. Back bodice length to the hip equals the sum of the arm side depths and the back bodice length to the waist. Garment length depends on the model. Front bodice length equals the back bodice length to the waist plus 4 to 6 cm depending on the bust size. For example, if your bust is 95 cm, you'll add 4.5 cm to the back bodice length to get the front bodice length. For a bust of 124 cm, add 5.5 cm plus 1/10 of the difference between your bust and 100 cm to the back bodice length to get the front bodice length. This approach helps to make your pattern more accurate. Horizontal measurements. Back across width. Calculated as 1/8 of the bust circumference plus 5.5 cm. Arm side width. calculated as 1/8 of the bust circumference minus 1.5 cm. Front across width equals 1/4 of the bust circumference minus 4 cm. In the next step, you'll adjust some of these measurements based on the model to ensure the garment has enough ease. For a regular fit pattern, add the ease value shown in the charts. I'll share the ease table for the main models with you as soon as possible. There is a PDF file in the description box that you can use to help determine your measurements and the details of the next garment you want to sew. Now let's move on to drafting the pattern. I'm using size 42 with a height of 168 cm. As I draft, I'll show you the calculations and formulas so you can better understand how to use them. I've highlighted the ease-related numbers in blue. Pattern drafting. Draw a vertical line. On this line, mark the arm side depth, back length to the waist, back length to the hips, and total garment length. Square out from these points, using a set square to draw horizontal lines. Mark 2 cm inwards on the waist, hip, and garment length line. Then connect point 6 on the waistline to point 1. On the arm side depth line, mark the back across width with ease. Next, measure 2/3 of the arm side width, leave some space, and then mark the remaining 1/3 of the arm side width. Finally, mark the front across width on this line. Measure half of the bust point distance backward from point 13. Use personal measurements for this. Draw vertical lines from the points obtained using a set square. Now define the back neckline and shoulder line on the back bodice pattern. Mark guide points for drawing the armhole on this line. Measure the distance from point 10 to 18, subtract 2 cm and move up the same distance from point 12. From point 24, measure up to the front bodice length, then measure down the bust length. Draw arcs using point 12 as a center and a radius from points 12 to 23, as well as using points 26 as a center and a radius from points 26 to 25. For a regular fit garment, mark 1/10 of half the bust circumference on the arc. For tighter fit, add up to 2 cm, which increases the shoulder dart size. If you want a looser fit, subtract up to 2 cm, reducing the shoulder dart size. Measure the back shoulder length and subtract 1 cm. Draw a line of this length from point 27, ending on the arc from point 25. Perpendicular from point 25. Draw a line to the center front. Now you can design the front neckline curve. Connect point 27 to point 22, and after determining the guide points, draw the armhole curve. Complete the back neckline curve. Measure the distance from points 25 to 30 and subtract it from the front shoulder from point 28. Connect points 32 to point 26 and mark the same distance from point 26 on the 26-25 line. Then connect point 30 to point 33 to complete the front shoulder. Measure 1/4 of the waist circumference minus 1 cm from point 34. The extra amount obtained is the dart amount for the front bodice. Mark half the waist circumference plus 2 to 4 cm from point 35. This extra amount in the back is for the darts and the side seam curve. Subtract 2 cm from the distance between points 35 to 37 and mark it on the hip line. Then measure half the hip circumference plus 1 to 2 cm from point 39. This amount usually crosses point 7, meaning that you fall short by this amount on the hip line. Note that the distance between the front and back patterns is not included in this measurement. Divide the distance between points 35 to 37 equally on both sides of the under bust line. Also divide the extra amount on the front hip line equally on both sides. Now you can complete the front dart. Pay attention to the dart drawing. Distribute the extra amount on the back waistline between the side seam curve and the back dart. Complete the side seam and back dart. If there is a significant remaining amount, you can add a second dart on the back. This second dart will be positioned on this line. Now compensate for the shortfall on the hip line by adding to the side seam. Then you can complete the side seams. The back shoulder needs to be moved up by 1 cm and the front shoulder moved down by 1 cm. Finally, draw the back armhole dart. The pattern drafting is complete here, but there are a few adjustments and customization that need to be done, which I'll explain in that next part. Adjustments, customization, and my experience. Neck adjustment. The first adjustment is for the neckline. Typically, the neckline in this method tends to be small, so it should be enlarged. For a standard round neckline, you can increase the front neckline depth by up to 2 cm and widen the neckline by up to 1 cm at the intersection of the neckline and shoulder. For the back, avoid lowering more than 1 cm from the center back line, and you can widen the neckline by up to 1.5 cm at the neckline and shoulder intersection. Shoulder adjustment. In the Müller method, the shoulder measurement is often slightly larger, so it needs customization. Some of this excess is adjusted in the neckline correction, and the rest is corrected at the intersection of the shoulder and armhole. Additionally, in this pattern making method, the back shoulder is 1 cm larger than the front shoulder. Some tailors shape and gather the back shoulder to match the front and then sew them together. Others adjust the shoulder size during pattern correction to make them equal. Armhole adjustment. The armhole in this method is often smaller than the desired size. First, make sure to measure the initial armhole to confirm if it's too small. If the garment you're making has sleeves, any amount lowered from the arm side depth line should be compensated by adding 1/3 to 1/2 to the width. For a sleeveless garment, you can keep the side seam as is or even slightly curve it inward for tighter garments. Center back seam adjustment. The Müller Method's basic pattern includes a center back seam, which needs correction if you are cutting the fabric on the fold. To make this adjustment, place the set square perpendicular to the garment length line so that it passes through point 7 and connects to point 1, the neckline. Keep in mind that this adjustment will require changes to the garment length line and the dart. You can watch the linked video for more details on these changes. Waist and hip customization. If the waist circumference with the current darts is satisfactory, no changes are needed. If you want a looser waist, you can reduce the dart size. However, if you want a tighter waist, you need to be aware of the limitation on the size of each dart. The dart near the center back can be up to 3 cm. If you add a second dart at the back, it should not exceed 2 cm. The side seam intake should not be more than 2 cm. It's recommended that the underbust dart should not exceed 3 cm. If after using all these allowances, the waist still needs to be tighter, consider using a seam or a style line instead of darts. On the hip line, if the pattern is too tight, meaning the hip circumference is insufficient, you can add up to 3 cm to the side seam on the hip line. Adding more than this amount can distort the pattern's shape. If you need to add more, you can create fullness by closing darts to achieve the desired size. When customizing the waist and hips, it's important to maintain proportion. If the difference between your waist and hip measurements is more than 14 cm and you want a perfectly fitted garment, using seams or a style line is the best option. However, if you prefer to use only darts, it's better to allow more ease in the waist so the garment fits more loosely around the waist and maintain proper proportion in pattern making. Underbust dart adjustment. For this adjustment, separate the pattern along the underbust dart and shoulder dart lines, and then reattach it so that there is no excess on the hip line. As a result of this adjustment, the shoulder dart will slightly enlarge and the garment length line will need some modifications. Redraw the underbust dart after calculating the reduced amount. Don't forget to adjust the garment's hem as well. Finally, I have to say that, in my experience, this pattern making method is extremely precise and effective. I believe the quality of this method is truly high, to the point where I can't tell the difference between a garment I've sewn myself and one from a well-known boutique or brand. I've used this method for everything from casual and sportswear to evening and special occasion dresses, and in my opinion, it stands out from other pattern making techniques. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found this tutorial helpful, and I'd love to hear how it worked out for you in your own pattern making. Your feedback means a lot to me, so please feel free to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you have any questions or need further clarification on anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'm here to help. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more sewing inspiration. Until next time, happy sewing!